He lost his home, his family, and everything he built. But what he did next shocked everyone. Before we start, join our YouTube family by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now let's get into the story. At 68, he stood outside his own house with a suitcase in his hand, and the door behind him was locked, not by strangers, but by his own family. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed louder than it should have. Final, cold, unforgiving. He didn't knock, didn't shout, didn't beg, because deep down, he already knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. A slow breath escaped his chest as he looked down at the suitcase beside him. Old, worn, just like everything else in his life. Inside it, a few clothes, some documents, and pieces of a life that had been quietly taken away from him. The evening air was still, too still, the kind of silence that follows something irreversible. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the street. The same street he had walked for decades, the same houses, the same neighbors, the same place he had once called home. But today, it felt unfamiliar, like he didn't belong there anymore. A curtain moved slightly in a nearby window. Someone watching, someone who knew, but no one came out. No one asked, because people don't step into other people's pain. They just observe it, from a safe distance. He picked up his suitcase. His hands didn't tremble, but his chest felt heavy, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with something deeper, emptiness, the kind that doesn't come from one moment, but from years of being slowly pushed aside. He took his first step away from the house, then another, each step quieter than the last, as if the world itself didn't want to notice him leaving. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when that house was full of life, voices, laughter, arguments that ended with understanding, meals shared at the same table. Back then, he was needed, important, respected. He had built that life with his own hands, worked long hours, sacrificed comfort, put his family first, every single time. There were nights he came home exhausted, but still smiled, still listened, still showed up, because that's what he believed a family was. Something you protect, something you give everything to. And for years, he did exactly that. But somewhere along the way, things changed, slowly, quietly, almost unnoticeably at first. Conversations became shorter, then fewer, then non-existent. His opinion stopped mattering. His presence became optional. Until one day, he realized he was living in the same house, but no longer part of it. He tried to ignore it, told himself it was just time, just distance, just life moving forward. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was being replaced, not physically, but emotionally. And then came the day, when everything became clear. He was sitting at the dining table, alone. Again, the food in front of him had gone cold. Again, he waited, like he always did. But no one came. He stood up slowly, walking toward the living room. Voices, laughter, coming from inside. He paused at the doorway. They were all there, together, watching something, talking, smiling, and for a moment, he just stood there, invisible. No one noticed him. No one turned. No one said, "Come sit with us." He cleared his throat slightly. A small sound, but enough. They looked up, briefly. "Food's on the table," he said quietly. A short silence followed. Then, "We already ate," someone replied casually. Just like that. Simple, normal, as if it meant nothing. He nodded slowly, turned around, and walked back to the table, alone. That was the moment something inside him shifted. Not broken, not yet, but cracked, because it wasn't just about the meal. It was about what it represented. He wasn't included anymore. He wasn't needed. And worst of all, he wasn't missed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the distance grew. Conversations turned into instructions, requests, occasional acknowledgments, nothing more. Until one evening, they sat him down. Formal, serious, uncomfortable. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't expect this. "We've been thinking," one voice began. Careful, measured. About what? He wondered silently. "This house. It's getting difficult to manage." He listened, quietly, not interrupting. "And we think it's time to make some changes." Changes. The word felt heavy, vague, dangerous. "What kind of changes?" he asked calmly. A pause. "Then, we think it would be better if you moved somewhere smaller." The words landed softly. But their impact was anything but. He didn't react immediately. Because sometimes, the mind needs time to catch up with reality. "You mean, leave?" he asked slowly. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, yes, just one word, but it carried everything. Decision, finality, distance. He looked at them. Really looked, searching for something. Doubt, regret, anything, but there was none. Just certainty. And that hurt more than anything else. I built this house, he said quietly, not angrily, just stating a fact. We know, came the reply, but things are different now. Different, he nodded slowly, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to hold on to. The decision had already been made, without him, and that's how he found himself here, standing outside, with a suitcase, at 68 years old, starting over, with nothing. The sky grew darker as he walked further down the street. The house disappeared behind him, and with it, the life he had known. He didn't know where he was going, didn't have a plan, didn't have anyone to call, just one step at a time. That was enough. For now, a bench appeared ahead, near a quiet park. He walked toward it slowly and sat down. The wood felt cold beneath him, but he didn't mind. He placed the suitcase beside him and leaned back slightly, staring at the sky. Stars were beginning to appear. Faint, distant, just like everything else in his life. He exhaled slowly, and for the first time that day, his eyes closed, not to sleep, but to escape, just for a moment, just long enough to forget. But then, a voice. Are you okay? His eyes opened slowly, and what he saw next was something he didn't expect. Because sometimes, the people who change your life appear when you've lost everything. Because sometimes, the people who change your life appear when you've lost everything. He opened his eyes slowly, adjusting to the soft glow of the streetlight above. A man stood in front of him. Not too close, not too far, just enough distance to feel respectful. You okay? The man repeated, his voice calm, not intrusive. For a moment, he didn't answer. He simply looked at him, trying to understand why someone would ask that question. At a time like this, most people didn't. Most people walked past, pretended not to see. I'm fine, he replied quietly. It was the kind of answer people give when they don't want to explain. The man didn't challenge it, didn't push, just nodded slightly, and sat down on the other end of the bench. Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just present. The kind of silence where two strangers share a moment without needing words. After a while, the man spoke again. You don't look fine. There was no judgment in his tone, just honesty. That made it harder to ignore. He let out a slow breath, his eyes drifting toward the ground. I'll figure it out, he said. Another common answer. Another shield. The man leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You don't have to do that alone. Those words lingered. Longer than they should have, because they weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. But they were unfamiliar. He hadn't heard something like that in a long time. He turned his head slightly, looking at the man more carefully now. There was something different about him. Not just kindness, but understanding, like he wasn't guessing, like he knew what it felt like. Why do you care? He asked. The question came out softer than expected, almost tired. The man smiled faintly. Because I've been there. That answer changed something. Not everything, but enough. He stayed quiet for a moment thinking, then finally said, They asked me to leave. No details, no explanations, just the truth. The man nodded slowly. Family? He hesitated, then nodded. The words still felt heavy, even now. That's rough, the man said quietly. No pity, no overreaction, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that felt better than anything else. I gave them everything, he added, his voice lower now. Not angry, just honest. And now, he stopped, because the rest didn't need to be said. The man understood. You still have something, he said after a moment. He frowned slightly. Like what? The man looked at him directly. Yourself. The answer felt simple. Too simple, but also strangely powerful. He looked away again, unsure how to respond. Because for so long, he had defined himself by what he gave, by what he built, by who he supported. Without those things, he didn't know who he was. Listen, the man said, standing up slowly. There's a place not far from here. Not perfect, but safe. He looked up, curious. Come on, the man added, gesturing lightly. A pause, a decision. He looked at his suitcase, then at the empty street, then back at the man, and slowly he stood up. The place was small, simple, a modest building tucked between older structures, the kind of place most people wouldn't notice. Inside it was quiet, clean, not luxurious, but warm. Temporary housing, the man explained, for people who need a reset. Reset. The word echoed in his mind. He hadn't thought of it that way. Not once. To him, this felt like an ending. But maybe it wasn't. He stepped inside slowly, taking in the surroundings. A few people sat quietly in the common area. No one stared. No one judged. Everyone seemed to understand, without asking. "You can stay here for a while," the man said. "Get your footing back." He nodded slightly, still processing everything. "Thank you," he said after a moment. The man smiled. "No problem." Days passed. Then weeks. At first he kept to himself. Spoke little, observed more. Old habits, protection. But slowly, that began to change. He started helping around. Small things, cleaning, fixing, organizing. Things he had always been good at. Things that made him feel useful again. One afternoon, he was repairing a broken chair in the corner of the room. Focused, careful, the same way he used to work years ago. "Did you do this kind of work before?" a voice asked. He looked up. Another resident stood nearby, watching. "I used to build things," he replied. The words felt strange, like they belonged to a different version of him. "Looks like you still can," the man said with a small smile. Something inside him shifted again. Small, but real. That evening, the man who had found him on the bench returned. He sat across from him, watching as he worked. "You're different," he said. He looked up slightly. "How?" "Less lost," the man replied. He paused, thinking maybe he was right. Not completely, but a little. "Still figuring things out," he said. The man nodded. "That's enough." Silence settled again. But this time, it felt lighter, more comfortable. After a moment, the man leaned forward slightly. "There's something I want to show you," he said. Curiosity sparked. Faint, but present. "What is it?" he asked. The man smiled. "You'll see." The next day they walked together. Not far, just a few streets away, until they reached a place that made him stop. A workshop. Old, but active. Tools. Wood. Projects in progress. It smelled familiar. Comforting. "This place," the man said, "helps people get back on their feet. Skills, work, purpose." He stood there, taking it all in. Something deep inside him stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. "This used to be your world, right?" the man asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah." "Then maybe," the man said, "it still can be." The words hit differently this time. Not as a suggestion, but as a possibility. A real one. He stepped inside, ran his hand over the surface of a wooden table, felt the texture, the weight, the memory. And in that moment, he realized something. He hadn't lost everything. Not really. Because some things stay with you, no matter how much time passes, no matter how far you fall. And as he stood there, surrounded by tools and unfinished work, a quiet thought formed in his mind. What if this wasn't just a second chance, but the beginning of something even greater than before? What if this wasn't just a second chance, but the beginning of something even greater than before? He stood there in the workshop, his hand resting on the wooden table, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Familiarity, not just in the tools, not just in the smell of wood and dust, but in himself. For so long, he had believed that part of his life was over. Gone, buried under years of silence, rejection, and loss. But standing there now, it didn't feel gone. It felt waiting for him to come back. "You don't have to decide today," the man said gently, standing beside him. "But if you want this, it's here." He nodded slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just absorbing. Because this wasn't something small. This was identity, purpose, and those things take time to rebuild. The first few days in the workshop were quiet. He didn't take on big projects, didn't try to prove anything. He just helped, organized tools, cleaned surfaces, watched others work, listened, learned, and remembered. Little by little, his hands began to move differently, more confidently, more naturally, like they hadn't forgotten. One afternoon, he picked up a piece of wood, simple, unfinished. He turned it slowly in his hands, studying its grain, its shape, its potential. Then, without thinking too much, he began, carefully, deliberately, cutting, sanding, shaping. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the workshop faded. All that mattered was the piece in front of him. And when he finished, he stepped back. A chair, simple, but solid, strong, made with precision, with care. He stared at it for a long moment, and for the first time in years, a small smile appeared on his face. "You made that?" someone asked behind him. He turned. A few people had gathered, looking at the chair, impressed. He nodded slightly. "Looks like you didn't forget after all," one of them said. He didn't respond, because the feeling inside him was bigger than words. That evening, the man who had helped him sat beside him again. "You're ready," he said. "For what?" he asked. "To stop surviving and start building again." The words stayed with him. That night he didn't sleep much, not because of worry, but because of thought. For so long, his life had been about loss, about what he didn't have, about what was taken from him. But now, there was something else. A direction, a path. And the question wasn't, what did I lose? It was, what can I create now? Weeks turned into months. The workshop became more than just a place. It became routine, purpose. He started taking on larger projects, helping others learn, sharing what he knew. People listened, respected him, not because of his past, but because of what he could do now. And slowly, his confidence returned, not all at once, but piece by piece, just like the things he built. One day, the man who had found him on the bench approached him with something in his hand. A document. He handed it over. "What's this?" he asked. "An opportunity," the man replied. He opened it, read it carefully, then looked up. A space?" The man nodded. "A small shop. It's not much, but it's yours, if you want it." His breath caught slightly. "A shop?" he repeated. "Yeah, you've earned it." Silence followed. Because this wasn't just help. This was trust. Belief. A future. "I don't know," he started, the old doubt creeping back in. But the man interrupted gently. "You do know." He looked down at the paper again, then around the workshop, then at his hands. Hands that had built things once before. Hands that had started building again. And finally, he nodded. "Okay." The shop wasn't big, but it was his. The first day he opened it, he stood at the doorway for a long moment, looking inside, at the tools, the space, the possibilities. It wasn't the life he had before. It was something new, something he created from nothing. Customers came slowly at first, curious, then returning. Word spread about the old man who built things with care, with precision, with heart. And business grew. But more importantly, so did he. One afternoon, as he worked on a piece near the window, a familiar car stopped outside. He didn't notice at first, until the door opened. Footsteps, familiar ones. He looked up and froze, because standing there was someone from his past, from the house he had left behind. Silence filled the space, heavy, uncomfortable. They looked older, tired, different, just like him. "I heard," they began, their voice uncertain, "about this place." He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at them, not with anger, not with pain, but with clarity. "I didn't expect to see you," he said calmly. They nodded slowly. "I know." Another silence. Then, "We made a mistake." The words came quietly, but they carried weight. Real weight. He listened, didn't interrupt, because for the first time, he didn't need to. "You deserved better," they continued. "You built everything." And we forgot that. His grip on the tool in his hand loosened slightly, not from emotion, but from understanding, because he had already processed this, already grown past it. He set the tool down, walked a few steps closer, and stopped. "I'm not the same person anymore," he said. Not as a warning, not as a defense, just as truth. They nodded. "I can see that." Another pause. Then they asked, "Can we fix this?" The question hung in the air, heavy, important, a choice, the kind of choice that defines who you've become. He looked at them for a long moment. Then slowly, he shook his head, not harshly, not coldly, just honestly. "Some things don't go back," he said. "But that doesn't mean they stay broken." They looked at him confused. He stepped slightly aside, gesturing to the shop, to the life he had. "Built. This is who I am now." A quiet understanding settled in. They nodded slowly, respectfully, and for the first time, there was no tension, no anger, just acceptance. They turned to leave, then paused. "I'm glad you're okay," they said. He nodded once. "Me too." They left, and the door closed behind them. But this time, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like closure. He turned back toward his workbench, picked up his tools, and continued. Because his story didn't end at that door. It began the moment he walked away from it. And as sunlight filled the shop, illuminating the life he had rebuilt with his own hands, one quiet truth remained. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover how strong you really are.